Well, it's interesting because you talked about your client didn't want to have that conversation, and you were chosen to have the conversation. It's one of the things I talk about is entering the danger. Is that something you do a lot for your clients, where you're the one that steps in to do the hard work, the heavy lifting, the difficult conversations?
Yeah, as I say, that's why they paid me the big bucks. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of my clients are actually very good negotiators, so it really depends on the client. Some of my clients, however, are really bad at negotiation. I'll give you an example of one situation where I usually try not to take over the negotiation. In that telephone conversation with the senator, my job was to take over. You know, but I usually try to kind of work in tandem with the client and feel their needs. One of my clients got themselves into a lot of trouble. They were a software developer for the clinical trials industry. And they had done contract software development for a clinical trials company who decided they weren't going to pay their bills. And by the time the client got to me, they were owed over $500,000 in unpaid bills. As you know, at that point in time, the debtor really has the lender by, I won't say what they have by.
They got him though.
Yeah, they got him.
They got him.
Okay, because there's no way you're going to walk away from that. So this is the situation. I walk in, and the company did not have a lot of money. My client's company itself was a startup. And so they were just basically using my client as their venture capitalist without my client's knowledge. And my client was going to go out of business. So my client is not really good at saying no and putting his foot down, so I had to be the substitute for that. You know, luckily he was using a form agreement that I had drafted for him, so we had a tool. And the tool was that the agreement, buried inside this 30-page agreement, was a provision that said if the accounts receivable were not paid within a certain period of time after the date due, then the client, who was not my client, but the buyer of his services to develop software, would not get good title to the software that was developed. They still had to pay, but they wouldn't own the software. Well, you know, we use that as leverage. This is like kind of building a house on somebody else's lot. And this is essentially what they did. They had these very big pharma companies were their clients. They were paying them money, but they were not passing to my clients. They were using the money to grow the rest of their company. So we got on the phone with them and explained that, you know, that either they could go tell their clients to stop all their clinical trials in which the software was being used, or we would. And that was not a viable solution for them because those other big companies had lawyers who were meaner and scarier than me even. And so we kind of worked out a deal over time because we did not want to put this company out of business because then, you know, that's killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. But on the other hand, my client was taking all the risk. So what we did was a series of negotiations, which we kept giving them short deadlines. Okay, if you pay us, if you get up current by this date, then, you know, we'll settle for that, the money you owe us plus the interest. If it goes, you know, 15 days beyond that, then you owe us more. Well, we did a series of those negotiations. Each time we did it, they tried to go back to my client, and he would always say, "Oh, sure, we'll go along with that." You know, and then they'd tell me, and at one point in time, I got on the phone and told my client, "If you agree to that deal, I am going to quit and never work for you again." And then he was able to say to these people who were really abusing him, they were able to say, "Well, I'm sorry, you know, I like working with Jim, and so I can't give you what you want." So the end of after a series of those negotiations with short deadlines, which they were never able to meet, my client ended up, one, getting paid all his accounts receivable plus interest, becoming the biggest equity holder in the business, because part of what we negotiated was that they would give us stock as a bonus for taking all the risk, because vendors are not supposed to take risk. Right. And then finally, they entered into a long-term contract with us that we would do all of their software development work, which worked out really nicely because they sold themselves to a bigger company that had a good credit rating. So my client got a 5-year development contract out of it from a good customer. So that he ended up with probably about four or five times as much as than if this company had been paying its bills on time. But that was a situation where, you know, I knew the client wanted to be the nice guy in the deal, and you know, I had to be the bad guy, and it worked out.
I'm sure you play it well, Jim.
Well, I'm really a nice guy most of the time. You know, somebody will tell you somewhere. Give me a day or two.
Give me a couple days. Make a couple
I'll find
calls.
somebody who will vouch for me. I'm really a nice guy. But you know, and in that deal, actually, the other side cried a couple of times. And there was one junior lawyer who worked with me, and she was on the phone a number of times and everything. And she went around telling all my partners, "Jim made somebody cry today." But you know how young lawyers are.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of the type of situation where most of my clients are very good negotiators, or they hire good negotiators. In this case, I was a negotiator who make up for the client really wanted to be loved by everybody.